High Five SDM. So in yesterday's bit of Kensuke's Kingdom, we read a little bit of the log, the ship's log that Michael has been writing, and there was a bit of a cliffhanger. He is out on the deck, and it said, nail-biting stuff, it's so dark out there, black. Stella's barking. She's up by the bow. She hasn't got her harness clipped on. Those were the last words I ever wrote in my log. After that, it's just empty pages. I tried calling Stella first, but she wouldn't come. So I left the wheel and went forward to bring her back. I took the ball with me to sweeten her in, to tempt her away from the bow of the boat. I crouched down. "Come on, Stella," I said, rolling the ball from hand to hand. "Come and get the ball." I felt the boat turn a little in the wind, and I knew then I shouldn't have left the wheel. The ball rolled away from me quite suddenly. I lunged after it, but it was gone over the side before I could grab it. I lay there on the deck, watching it bob away into the darkness. I was furious with myself for being so silly. I was still cursing myself when I thought I heard the sound of singing. Someone was singing out there in the darkness. I called out, but no one replied. So that was what Stella had been barking at. I looked again for my ball, but by now it had disappeared. That ball had been very precious to me, precious to all of us. I knew then I'd just lost a great deal more than a football. I was angry with Stella. The whole thing had been her fault. She was still barking. I couldn't hear the singing any more. I called her again, whistled her in. She wouldn't come. I got to my feet and went forward. I took her by the collar and pulled. She would not be moved. I couldn't drag her all the way back, so I bent down to pick her up. She was still reluctant. Then I had her in my arms, but she was struggling. I heard the wind above me in the sails. I remember thinking, this is silly. You haven't got your safety harness on. You haven't got your life jacket on. You shouldn't be doing this. Then the boat veered violently, and I was thrown sideways. With my arms full, I had no time to grab the guardrail. We were in the cold of the sea before I could even open my mouth to scream. Chapter 4. Gibbons and Ghosts. The terrors came fast, one upon another. The lights of the Peggy Sue went away in the dark of the night, leaving me alone in the ocean, alone with the certainty that they were already too far away, that my cries for help could not possibly be heard. I thought then of the sharks, cruising the black water beneath me, scenting me, already searching me out, homing in on me. I knew there could be no hope. I would be eaten alive. Either that or I would drown slowly. Nothing could save me. I trod the water, frantically searching the impenetrable darkness about me for something, anything to swim towards. There was nothing. Then a sudden glimpse of white in the sea, the breaking of wave, perhaps. But there were no waves. Stella! It had to be. I was so thankful, so relieved not to be all alone. I called out and swam towards her. She would keep bobbing away from me, vanishing, reappearing, then vanishing again. She had seemed so near, but it took several minutes of hard swimming before I came close enough to reach out and touch her. Only then did I realise my mistake. Stella's head was mostly black. This was white. It was my football. I grabbed it and clung on, feeling the unexpected and wonderful buoyancy of it. I held on, treading water and calling for Stella. There was no answer. I called and called, but every time I opened my mouth now, the seawater washed in. I had to give her up. I had to save myself if I could. There was little point in wasting energy by trying to swim. After all, I had nowhere to swim to. Instead, I would simply float. I would cling onto my football, tread water gently, and wait for the Peggy Sue to come back. Sooner or later, they had to discover I was overboard. Sooner or later, they would come looking for me. I mustn't kick too much. just enough to keep my chin above the water, no more. Too much movement would attract the sharks. Morning must come soon. I had to hang on till then. I had to. The water wasn't that cold, and I had my football. I had a chance. I kept telling myself that over and over again, but the world stayed stubbornly black about me, and I could feel the water slowly chilling me to death. I tried singing to stop myself from shivering, to take my mind off the sharks. I sang every song I could remember, but after a while I'd forget the words. Always I came back to the only song I was sure I could finish, 10 Green Bottles. I sang it out loud again and again. It reassured me to hear the sound of my own voice. It made me feel less alone in the sea, and always I looked for the grey glint of dawn. But it would not come. It would not come. Eventually I fell silent, and my legs just would not kick any more. I clung to my football, my head drifting into sleep. I knew I mustn't, but I couldn't help myself. My hands kept slipping off the ball. I was fast losing my sense of strength. I would go down to the bottom of the sea and lie in my grave among the seaweeds and the sailors, bones and shipwrecks. The strange thing was that I didn't really mind. I didn't care, not any more. I floated away into sleep, into my dreams. And in my dream I saw a boat gliding towards me, silent over the sea. The Peggy Sue. Dear, dear Peggy Sue. They'd come back for me. I knew they would. Strong arms grabbed me. I was hauled upwards and out of the water. I lay there on the deck, gasping for air like a landed fish. Someone was bending over me, shaking me, talking to me. I could not understand a word that was being said, but it didn't matter. I felt Stella's hot breath on my face, her tongue licking my ear. She was safe. I was safe. All was well. I was woken by a howling, like the howling of a gale through the masts. I looked about me. There were no masts above me. There were no sails, no movement of under me either, no breath of wind. Stella Artois was barking, but some way off. I was not on a boat at all, but lying stretched out on sand. The howling became a screaming, a fearful crescendo of screeching that died away in its own echoes. I sat up. I was on a beach, a broad white sweep of sand, with trees growing thick and lush behind me, right down to the beach. Then I saw Stella prancing about in the shallows. I called her and she came bounding up out of the sea to greet me, her tail circling wildly. When the leaping and licking and hugging were done, I struggled to my feet. I was weak all over. I looked all about me. The wide blue sea was as empty as the cloudless sky above. No Peggy Sue. No boat. Nothing. No one. I called again and again for my mother and my father. I called until the tears came and I could call no more, until I knew there was no point. I stood there for some time, trying to work out how I had got here, how it was that I'd survived. I had such confused memories of being picked up, of being on board the Peggy Sue, but I knew now that I couldn't have been. I must have dreamt it, dreamed the whole thing. I must have clung onto my football and kept myself afloat until I was washed up. I thought of my football then, but it was nowhere to be seen. And that's where we're going to stop. Michael has been washed up on an island. See you soon.